Three, two, one, and we are live. Hey, all right, folks. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. This is part of my Chasing Success series, and today we have a special guest. His name is Strategic Eyes. Strategic Eyes is a New York police officer. Can't exactly say where, but and this is something I've actually wanted to do for a long time, which is just talk about like a little bit about the world of being a police officer, and just want to get like some like one-on-one conversations with with one, especially given the current environment. So Strategic, just introduce yourself real quick.
Hey, how you doing? I'm Strategic Eyes. I'm the host of the Strategic Eyes show. I'm also an active duty police officer in the state of New York. Definitely just started doing YouTube just to educate people on what it is to be a police officer and how to interact with police and get out safely. That's what started it. And it just ended up being just a lifestyle show where I talk about everything, mostly politics and race relations, etc.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, and like I actually just stumbled onto your channel because through a mutual friend of ours. And and I'll be honest, I just go through your videos, and it's really very interesting to see like a lot of the hot topics that are going on today is where there's like police like brutality involved, and just like a lot of the things that come out of the people, especially on the left, like such as like the defund the police and everything, and 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 and, and it's kind of crazy because because when I was growing up, like because I grew up in New York City, and I'm just gonna dive right into it. Just we're gonna get dirty today. But like when I was growing up, like I was just taught that police officers, they're people that they're there to help you out. They're there to they're there if you're in trouble, you call 911. They're there to take care of you. If you're lost, they'll help take you home. And then and that was the narrative versus today. It seems like the narrative seems to be go to a police officer only if it's your last case scenario, worst case scenario. Don't trust them. Like what happened from like the 1990s till today? Like what do you like? How do you what happened? What changed?
Well, the funny thing is the easy answer would be to say, oh, well, the activists did it and the Democrats did it. That's just not an accurate answer.
Mm-hmm.
It's nuanced. It's a lot of the issues that we're having in police is self-manufactured. So on one
Oh.
hand, we have stop and frisk because you're from New York. I grew up in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Stop and frisk just literally destroyed the relations between the community and the police.
Interesting.
Literally destroyed. I was a victim of stop and frisk like probably 13 times. Like you just be
Mm.
walking, like I would come out my project building to go to the corner store, and these officers are like assigned to that building. So they know you, they see you. They don't know you personally, but they see you, they know you, they know this guy lives here. And they're like, hey, come here, we're going on a wall. And then they frisk you, and their hands are going by your nuts and all that different stuff. And you're like, you feel violated, and you're like, what the hell?
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to the store, then you come back in, and they're like, yeah, let me frisk you again. Because what happened was the police officers were being forced to do it by their higher ups, because that's what Giuliani and that's what Bloomberg wanted, and it just destroyed the relation with the community. But on the other hand, you had Democratic politicians who picked up on that collective anger that some communities, most often Black and Latino communities, were feeling based off how they were being treated by police officers. And now they made it a racial thing. They made it these guys are slave catchers. These guys are not here to help you. These guys are here to destroy you. They're here to kill you. And so now you have this reputation that the police did to themselves mixed in with the politics that were put into play to get votes. And now we're in the climate we're in right now.
Uh, so interesting, because I've heard a lot from like police officers who said good things about stop and frisk, and that it did allow them to catch more criminals. But now I'm hearing from your mouth, and you're an officer yourself, that stop and frisk was actually bad for the
No,
community.
no, no, no. No, what I'm saying is that's a nuanced conversation as
Okay.
well. Stop and frisk, how it was implemented, was bad for the community. It
Mm,
was bad for the community because it was not following the Constitution.
mm,
Stop and frisk is a police technique that has been upheld by the Supreme Court as a constitutional act.
Mm-hmm.
And what you need to do is you need to be able to articulate that you see that the person has a weapon or something to that effect, or is engaging in a criminal activity or might engage in a criminal activity, which will allow you then to stop, question them. And then if you can articulate that you see possibly a weapon on them, then you can frisk them.
Mm.
See how stop and frisk was being implemented in New York was, I'm just going to stop you without any probable cause whatsoever, simply because I have to come back to the station house with a number and a name. And while I'm at it, I'm going to search you, even though I can't articulate that you have a weapon on you. So when stop and frisk is used correctly, you're going to get a whole bunch of guns and weapon off the street. And there were cops who, like, there were two levels of police officers in New York City during the time of stop and frisk. You had the beat cops. Many of them were working like these programs called Impact, where they just throw rookies on the street, who were doing stop and frisk. These guys were just like, bring me numbers. Their sergeants, their lieutenants, their bosses were saying, bring me numbers, bring me a list of people that you stopped and frisked. I don't care how you got it.
Oh wow.
90% of the time, those guys weren't bringing any weapons, any arrests in.
They just brought in a notepad that says these are the people that I stopped and frisked.
Right. And
wow.
Those were innocent people that were being harassed. Now, on the other hand, there were more higher trained officers in narcotics, in guns, in gangs, in vice. These guys didn't have quotas. They weren't told, go get me numbers. They were using stop and frisk the way it was supposed to be used. And those guys were bringing in the guns, bringing in the drugs, bringing in the weapons. So if we use stop and frisk the way that the trained detectives who were using it constitutionally, and they had to use it constitutionally because they were taking that evidence to court. And if they obtained that gun unconstitutionally, if they could not articulate that they saw that guy with a weapon when they stopped him, the jury would throw that out. The defense attorney would jump on that. So those guys, if police departments were using it in a constitutional manner, the way that those elite units were using it, it wouldn't be a problem. The problem is what the beat cops were instructed to do on the bottom level, just stopping random people, such as myself when I was a kid living out there. That's what destroyed the community. If it, not to go on and on, but just to help your audience get that complete picture. If I'm living in the slums and I'm trying my best to do the right thing, and I know that guy, and that guy is a drug dealer and a gang member and a cancer to the community, but you stopped me 3 times last week and you don't stop him, how am I going to feel? I'm going to get resentful. I'm going to get pissed off.
Got you. Wow. So I've never heard stop and frisk explained that way ever in my life. So stop and frisk is uniquely it was made famous in New York City. How about for the rest of the police the police relations in the rest of the nation? If you're able to speak about that, because stop and frisk wasn't everywhere, but it was definitely in New York City and a couple other larger cities, because police tensions exist definitely in more than New York cities, but does the same system exist in other cities? Is what I guess was what I'm trying to ask here.
Well, stop, question, and frisk is used in every single police department in the United States of America across this country.
Oh.
The difference is when you have large police departments, first of all, it wasn't first done in New York. I think Bratton or somebody brought that from I forgot wherever he worked, probably in Massachusetts, Boston or something. I don't know. Okay. But I know it was happening in Chicago. It's happening in Manhattan. Not Manhattan. In New York City. It's happening in all major police departments. The problem is, the difference is that when you have large departments, there's a disconnect from the community. It's just a natural disconnect.
Yeah, at that scale.
Yeah, at that scale. When I think New York has 30,000 cops. Mm-hmm. LA has 10,000. Chicago has 8,000. When you're in a small town or a small city,
where
They
everyone
call
knows
those
each
little
other.
town cities. Yeah, they call it a city, but like it's like only like 5,000 people in there.
Oh, come
You
on, that's
know,
not a city.
yeah, like we both from New York City. Where you have 8 million people in that city, like 3 million people in Manhattan alone.
Mm-hmm.
Each borough has like 2 to 3 million people. You're not gonna see this guy and oh, that's Johnny's son.
No.
Or that's Fran's, nephew or daughter. So you're gonna just naturally treat people differently than if they're just another number, just another random face. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it was used differently in these large cities because one, there's more crime, and the people are crying out for police to do something. Just like they're crying out for police to do something now, but they want to defund the police, but they want police to stop the bullets raining down on their relatives and their kids.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like an oxymoron kind of situation. But people are asking for you to stop the crime. And every other day in these large cities, you see somebody doing a heinous crime, a child getting killed, a mother getting killed, the son who's going to Harvard just getting killed. People are crying for you to do something. It's much easier to fall into that space where you just start violating people's rights because it's not personal to you. You don't relate. And then another issue that I always thought was a big problem when I was growing up in New York City, which is not a problem anymore, really, because the department in New York City is much more diverse, but I don't live there now. So it doesn't benefit me, but it certainly benefits the people who do. Is that a lot of times you had an issue where there are very lucrative police departments that surround New York City in the suburbs where
Mm-hmm.
they make a boatload of money. Like one place in Suffolk County where they pay their officers $200,000 a year.
Ha-
These guys are making, yeah, they're making almost doctor money. And
Ho.
then Nassau County is making like 180,000. Westchester County is making like $180.
Oh,
Rockland a buck
those are
eighty.
some of the wealthiest counties in the
Wealthiest
Northeast.
counties in the Northeast, and so but they also have big forces, not big as New York, but like they have thousands of officers. So it's not like you have a lottery ticket to get in. Like you can get in. It's not easy, but you can get in.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these cats who lived in these communities, primarily Caucasian folks, they can't get into those police departments. Their scores weren't high enough, or they just weren't lucky enough, whatever. So a lot of them would come to work for New York City Police Department, and a lot of them are good people, but they never really worked in an urban environment.
Oh,
So
that
if you
sounds like a
live,
bad idea.
yeah, I mean, so if you live in the suburbs of New York City and you've come to the city before, but you went to 42nd Street and you went to see a Broadway play, but you never really was in the city,
Mm-hmm.
and then all you see is Law and Order on you. You're a big fan of Law and Order because you want to be a cop, and every single bad guy is a black guy. And now you come into the city and you see a whole bunch of minorities walking around with their pants falling off their asses and listening to hip hop music and it's easy to stereotype that guy is a gangster or a thug. When if you're from New York City, yeah, that kid's got his pants sagging off his ass, but he's probably a Rhodes Scholar.
Mm-hmm.
He goes to Stuyvesant High School. He goes
Mm-hmm.
to St. John's University. He goes to NYU. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But so we had to deal with a lot of that. That was a big issue. Is that a lot of these guys looked at everybody who didn't look like them as a possible perpetrator because they just been brainwashed into that bigotry from media as well as their own biases not growing up inside of that community. So it makes it easy for you to stop and frisk a guy like that who's saying, why are you touching me like that? Why are you doing this? It's easy to do that if he doesn't look like your nephew, if he doesn't look like your son. And if all of the media that you consume tells you that he's a bad guy. And that was a big issue. And it's not an issue anymore, I don't think, because that is NYPD is one of the most diverse police forces in the nation, and that's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
Very diverse force.
So, so what solved that problem then? How did that go away? I'm curious.
I
Is it
think
the
that
diversity?
I think the just stopping the policy period
Mm-hmm.
and the diversity, but the policy is number one because it doesn't
The
matter
stop
if
and
you're
frisk
black.
one.
Yeah, the stop and frisk policy, which De Blasio stopped, because
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter what race you are. People are gonna they're gonna follow orders because that's their job.
Mm-hmm.
So if a supervisor tells you, most law enforcement agencies across, in fact, all police agencies across this country are paramilitary or organizations. So if your boss says, well, this is our policy to do stop and frisk, because it was literally their policy. It's like the NYPD wasn't doing something underhanded. They were literally doing what the mayor told them and the city council told them to do. And they had a whole policy for it and a way of tracking it. So it was literally your job description to do it. Even though we all know it's unconstitutional, it was proven in court. At the time, it wasn't unconstitutional to them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you told your boss, you're a black guy, and you tell your boss, I'm not stopping and frisking folks, you'd be subject to discipline.
Mm.
So it's not just white guys who were stopping frisking people. It was blacks, Latinos, Asians. It was everybody who had a badge on who didn't want to get in trouble, who didn't want to lose vacation days, who didn't want to not become a detective because now you can't grow in your career because you're not following orders. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because this action is a metric of your productivity on the job. So stopping the policy was king, because even if you have a diverse workforce, that's not going to stop the majority of that diversity from just following orders and still doing the action that's destroying, the ties with the community.
Gotcha.
If that makes any sense to you.
Oh no, 100% makes sense, because I'm all about just uh because I'm all about just understanding like that results are always the final product of whatever system that they're in place in. In this case, the system was stop and frisk, and you explained very well about not that it was a bad policy, but just the system that it was implemented in was extremely bad, and just stopping it just seems to have solved a lot of problems, is what I'm hearing from you. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely.
Awesome.
It went a long way to healing some of the fractures that we had that existed in the community for those officers down there.
Gotcha. So since it stopped, you would say that at least in New York City, or at least in New York, that police relationships have improved with the community.
I would think so. I mean, once again, I just want to throw this disclaimer. I don't work for NYPD. I work for a police agency in New York. So I'm just telling you my opinions. I'm not speaking on behalf of the New York City Police Department. I don't have the authority to do that. I'm just a private citizen who's a cop and just using my expertise to forward this conversation. But from my understanding, I do have a lot of friends that, law enforcement is a close-knit community. I do have a lot of friends who are on the force, and they have told me that, in their opinion, that it has gone a long way of healing those bonds. And also the officers are happy that they don't have to go out and do those things,
Mm-hmm.
because they're human beings too. And most of them are part of that community. So they're being, you're being told to go, a lot of them were stopping frisk. I'm a police officer and I was stopping frisk. So now
Oh.
if I was told, like I said, I got stopped frisk almost like 13 times. So if I was told to go out there and stop and frisk somebody not doing it constitutionally, I'll stop and frisk you if it's constitutional. If I see you doing something wrong and I can articulate that you have a gun or something, I'm going to stop and frisk you because I think you got a gun, and I want to get that gun off of you so I don't get killed. But if you're telling me to just go do that just to get a number and fill up a database or something like that, I'm going to feel some type of way, because I'm going to remember how violated I felt when it was done to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those cops are very happy that they don't have to, especially with this in this time frame. A lot of those folks were those kids back then. So
Mm-hmm.
I think they're very happy they don't have to victimize people the way that they were victimized,
Awesome.
or choose a different profession.
I don't know. That actually makes me feel very good just to hear that. All of that, actually. Thank you. So I want to touch. So we're gonna move the conversation along. I think we covered this very well. I want to touch on something that you mentioned earlier, which is the police force being a paramilitary force, and there exists a large group of people, in Western society that view the militarization of the police as a very, very negative thing. In fact, actually, one of the questions I received specifically wanted me to ask you about that. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Okay. Um, okay, it says, ask him to explain. Ask him to explain about the militarization of local police forces. Does every town, regardless of size, need a SWAT team? And underneath that is another one just related. As I'm just gonna add this on top of that is does militarization of police force increase crime and increase aggression in local communities?
So it's like a two-part question, but it's even a little bit more nuanced than that. So first of all, a SWAT team has nothing to do with militarization.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess a lot of people think so because they see them in what could be perceived as military garb, but it's not. It's just SWAT teams are specially trained officers who go into situations like hostage situations, people who are suicidal, people who are mass shooters. They go into those situations executing high risk warrants like, hey, we got to go take down this drug dealer and he's got AK-47s in there and he's a killer, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So does every town need a SWAT team? I don't think every town needs a SWAT team, but every county needs a SWAT team so that you can call them in to go to any town in that county that may need that help. Yeah, absolutely. It has nothing to do with militarization. I think a lot of times when people talk about militarization, at least the people who are academics, they're not talking about the paramilitary structure of policing. They're talking about having military equipment
Mm-hmm.
when they see those big bobcats and stuff like that, they see officers with semi-automatic rifles and stuff. They're looking at that as militarization. You have to have paramilitary um, structure and organization in policing because policing is almost like the military. You're
Mm-hmm.
giving people guns, you're giving them a license to kill when it's constitutional, and even more so, I mean, the military does this too, but you're actually helping, giving them the power to incarcerate people to take their constitutional rights away. When you put handcuffs on a person, you're suspending their constitutional rights. You're
Mm-hmm.
literally suspending it. Like they are not free to go and walk away. When like the people who don't like cops, they'll say, if a cop stops you, make sure that they have a reason to stop you because then they can't stop you. They're telling you you have a constitutional right not to answer a question or to walk away, which in some instances you do. But when a police officer decides that they have enough to put handcuffs on you, that constitution is suspended. It's not for you until we get to the next level. When you're processed and then you see a lawyer, then certain constitutional rights open up for you and some still are closed for you.
Mm-hmm.
So do do I think that we should have paramilitary? Yes, because you need to be able as a sergeant to tell an officer, all right, there's an active shooter in this building, go in. If it's not paramilitary, that person could say no, I'm not going in. And if they say I'm not going in because there's an active shooter in there, who's getting killed right now? Innocent people. So you need to be able to do that. You need to be able to discipline a person if they violate the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And the disciplinary structure needs to be different than somebody who's, a janitor in a school or works in a DMV or whatever. Um, I want to make sure I answered every question. What's the questions again, just to make sure I tackled everything?
I think I think you've answered everything so far, but the last one was does the militarization of the police with their equipment create a more hostile environment in certain communities?
No, because I mean, listen, I can't speak for every community, and I think down south, sometimes they take things a little far, but I only know what I see on YouTube. Like down south, every time, like every time there's like a problem, hey, let's go to the trunk and get the ARs. Like they're coming with the rifles and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'd feel the same way if I had access to it. In my department, we don't have those type of weapons. We just have our Glocks.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, so I can't speak for down south, but I can speak for New York State because before being a police officer, I worked as a state investigator and I traveled all over the state of New York. Every little nook and cranny, every major city, every impoverished town, I had the opportunity to drive through, step in, do some business, whatever. And I don't see officers out there looking like they're in the military. The
Mm-hmm.
only time I see officers with what could be construed as military garb or military equipment, like big bobcats and stuff like that, is when the situation calls for it. Like there's a mass murderer, that they need protection from. So that big Bobcat is a bulletproof vehicle. So if you have a guy that's an active shooter and he's in his house and he's shooting out the window, what do you want the cops to do? Show up in an Impala where the bullets just go through everything? Or do you want them in a protected vehicle that's going to protect them? When they're busting in a house with the lights off and they don't know where the bad guy is located in his house, do you want them to have that small bulletproof vest that I have to carry? Or do you want them to have what looks like military garb, but in all actuality is ankle to wrist body armor, so that if they get shot in their arm, it bounces off. If they get shot in their stomach, in their chest, it bounces off. And they can actually get into it and get close to that bad guy and neutralize that threat. That's what you see. But the media makes it seem like we're in Fallujah in America and you're being, plagued by an occupied force, and that's just not true.
So what can be done to to educate people on everything that you just said about like the militarization, about the paramilitary structure and why that's necessary? Because like you said, when you turn on like Law and Order, you see certain things and people believe that, oh, that's exactly how cops are all the time, and they think that, oh, they're all carrying AKs, or no, you guys don't get AKs. SWAT gets AR-15s,
and M5s and stuff like that.
Yeah, and a lot of people think like that's the actual how cops actually operate in every single scenario, and so what do you think can be done to just fix that specific perception of police officers?
I don't know. I mean, it's tough because there's like $1 billion industry that exists for the perpetuate these these lies or exaggerations. It's the media. So I mean, the news is a part of the media. So the news is gonna only carry the salacious stories, which often results in somebody dying. The media entertainment industry, like when you see like the Law and Order and NCIS stuff, I don't watch it. So Blue Bloods and all that stuff. Like I watch Blue Bloods and I'm like, this is so fake. You'll watch that and you think like, oh, this is how that really works. Like, no, it's not. So you got to contend with those perceptions, and then you have to contend with the historical traumas that exist in our country. Where a lot of people have been victimized by police or feel that they've been victimized.
Ooh.
And so therefore you're already in a losing battle, because their cultural perception is that the police are not there to protect and serve, but just there to hurt people.
Man, I wish that I could definitely speak true to that cultural perspective, because I definitely saw it growing up. Because I don't know how familiar you are with Staten Island, but I spent a lot of time in like Stapleton and like in West Brighton, which are like the hoods of Staten Island, and it happened all the time. But there was always this one cop, Officer Reyes. He worked at the 120 precinct. He actually lived in the West Brighton area, and everybody knew him because he was the one cop that we all said, "Yo, Officer Reyes is cool," and he would come and he would always play basketball with us, like whenever he wasn't on duty. And whenever he was around, like everybody felt good, and because they knew that, oh, he's around, no one's gonna act a fool. Because I remember there was one time, this one kid, he did want to act. He was, because he was a 13-year-old youngin', right, and he was just up and coming, and he felt like he had something to prove, right. So one day he was just melting off because we beat him in basketball. Like, it was bad too. It was like we beat him like 21-7. We killed his team, and then and he took the basketball. He just threw it to the other side of the yard, and Officer Reyes was like, "Yo, go get the ball." And then the little kid, the youngin, he tried to flex on Reyes. He's like, "No, you get the ball." And then Reyes is like, "All right, cool. So here's what's gonna happen right now. If you're a tough man, show me you're a tough man. We're gonna throw hands right now, all right?" And this kid's like, "Oh yeah, yeah," and took less than 20 seconds. The kid was on the ground and he was beat. And then after that, like he respected the officer for what he was. The man who kept the community together, who flexed when he needed. And I just wanted to share that with you, just because like
Mhm.
that was just an officer who had a huge impact on the West Brighton community.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean that's part of community policing, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of police departments are engaging in that. They're getting steady officers. I mean, they're not going to live in a community, but they're going to be the steady faces of that community, and they're going to embed with that community. They're going to get to know people. So that's a good thing. I mean, but I mean, they're just with that story, and that's good that that outcome turned out the way it did. But to me, there's so many issues with that story in terms of I want to know, like, did this kid have a father in his life? You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of times when you see young men act like that, they're doing that because they don't have male figures in their life, so they don't understand the structure of authority. They don't understand that yeah, you're a young man and you got two hairs on your balls, but you still have to respect men who are older than you. So I wonder if that's the case, that this kid acted the way he acted. I hope that
He had a father, but his father was kind of a degenerate. Like,
right. So then that's equal to no father.
yeah, pretty
You
much.
know,
He didn't have a good role model.
right. So like I could be there every day, and I could change your diapers when you was a kid and all of that. But if I'm out there selling drugs, and if I'm beating on women and all this stuff, it doesn't matter if I tuck you in bed every night.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a good role model to you. I'm not giving you, the tools you need to be a good man. I'm just there. Those type of fathers, better that they're not there half the time, because maybe the kid might latch on to a positive role model, and model himself after that person, rather than model himself after the piece of shit father that's in his face.
Like Officer Reyes.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. So moving on.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna pluck another question from this list right over here.
Mhm.
All right. So this one is talking about like just the past 2 years specifically, with like COVID and all the craziness that's been going on. Which is, given the rise in crime generally all over major cities, especially in Democrat-leaning cities, how have police tactics changed, if there's been any change at all?
The misconception, you hear this a lot from police unions. You also hear it from politicians on both sides. They use it to their benefit, whether it's a positive or negative, is that police officers have slowed down, and they're not doing their job,
Mm-hmm.
and they're scared and stuff like that. It's not true.
Mm.
Understand that police officers are specially picked for certain personality traits. And one of those personality traits is that they're hard workers. Like you go through tons of psychological examination to be qualified for the job. And when you're on the job, they don't keep psychologically examining you, which I think is bad, because police officers see so much crap. You should be giving them some mental health checkups, and making sure that they're okay. That's a different conversation. So they want assertive people. They want hardworking people. They want people that are just a little bit crazy, in that we're not afraid. Like, I'm in a car and it's like, yo, shots fired, and I'm like, let's go. And my partner's like, let's go. And we're like, we're okay with driving to a gunfight. You know what I'm saying? We're like, okay, like, oh, knife fight, guy crazy, threatening to stab people. Ah, let's go. You know, you're like, most people are like, hell effing no, I don't want,
No, I'm,
and we're
I'm,
like, yeah, let's go. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So the issue that you're having in a society, especially in democratic leaning states and cities, is not that the cops aren't doing their jobs. It's that you elected leaders who are soft on crime. You passed laws as a result of George Floyd movement
oof.
that has softened crime. You have passed laws and edicts like bail reform that is soft on crime. So the police are still doing the job. The the difference is what happens after they do the arrest. Is
So
that charge, when they're charged with a felony, is the district attorney going to keep that as a felony, or they're going to knock that down to a misdemeanor?
So like
When they
give me some examples of like what do you mean when you say soft on crime? Like what are some of the laws and legislations going on?
so like in New York, I only speak for New York, guy.
Okay.
'Cause I don't know what's happening everywhere else, but in New York we have bail reform. So to me, bail reform is necessary. So I always give this example. Me and you, Rex, we go to a corner store. We both don't have criminal records, right?
Mm-hmm.
We both steal. You're on the other side of the store. I'm on the other side of the store. We both steal. We don't even know we both stealing, but we both steal. Cop is coming in because he wants a Snapple. Owner says, "Look, these two guys stole. We get arrested." Let me clear my throat.
And I was holding
So
one too.
it's all good. So we both arrested. The difference is though, I'm poor and you're rich. So we go before the judge, and the judge says, "All right, you guys stole $500 bail. How's it fair that you get to walk because you have $500, but I have to stay in prison for 6 months to 6 months for a year to a year and a half until my case is adjudicated for me to get a slap on the wrist because I got a first time offense." So bail reform is needed because what bail reform says is, well, listen, if you both have no record, you both did something minor like stealing, you get to walk. You get not to walk like you don't face any consequences, but you don't get any bail. You get to go on these streets and fight your case from the streets. That's how bail reform is supposed to work. But
Mm-hmm.
what these politicians did is they did a whole list of violent crimes, selling drugs, things that literally destroy communities. Not things like I stole, pack of pencils or a pack of diapers for my kid. No, they serious crimes they've added to that no bail list. So now you get a guy with a gun in New York. He didn't shoot anybody, but you got him with a legal gun. He gets to walk. Back in the old days, he'd have to pay five, six, $10,000 to walk. So now we have a situation where let's go to the poor guy who steals. Well, instead of saying for your first or your second offense, we'll give you this leeway and let you have no bail, it's just carte blanche. So now you're catching a guy who's stealing every day from the Dwayne Reed Walgreens CVS. This is his 50th time in the last 2 months that he's been arrested for stealing, and he still gets to go free. That's the problem. So now you have an economic issue because people are stealing like crazy from these stores, causing them to close, and there's
Mm-hmm.
no recourse because most of the people who do that type of theft are drug addicts. So they don't care about consequences. They only care about getting high. So the more you let them out, the more they're going to steal. The more they steal, the more drugs they're going to buy. That's going to now fuel a whole different economy, the drug trade. But in the meantime, you're hurting local businesses because the the thieves don't feel like there's any consequence. The consequence for a drug addict is to go to jail. Because if you're in jail, conceivably, you won't be able to have access to drugs. You're going to suffer. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
physically suffer. You're going to go through withdrawal. But when you take that away and you say, hey, steal as many times as you want, we're just going to bring you to the precinct, do paperwork for 2 hours, and then release you from the precinct. That's what happens in New York State. Doesn't matter if you're in New York City, Buffalo, New York, Albany, New York, or Onondaga, Watertown, places you probably never even heard about. Finger Lakes region. It doesn't matter where you are. You're going to go into that police station, that police precinct, police station. They're going to fill out an hour to 2 hours worth of paperwork. And then you're going to leave out the front doors. You came in cuffs. You're going to walk out those front doors free person. And as long as you do those low-level crimes, you're going to keep coming out.
The politicians have to see this. They have to see the numbers. They have to see what's going on. Like, why is this still a thing? Why is this still going on? Like,
because politicians don't care. What they care about are about the loudest voices. And if you're a activist and you can organize 10,000 people to march down the city square, the main street,
mm-hmm.
that's who they're gonna listen to. Because most of us are apathetic. We don't care. As long as our houses are paid for, our cars got gas in it, kids have health care. Like, oh, whatever. I live in the suburbs. The people up here don't care about what's happening. So they don't have to deal with that stuff anyway. There's no crime up here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nothing to galvanize them to join the folks who are suffering from these bail reforms and say, you have to go vote. They don't care. They just vote, down the line if they're a Democrat, down the line if they're a Republican. They're not looking deep into the policies because those policies don't affect them. They don't affect affluent or middle class communities because we don't have crime in these areas. The crimes are in the cities.
But it's gonna affect them eventually because crime is crime, and poverty, it's like a cancer, and it spreads, because if you actually look at the history of Harlem back in like the 1920s, 1940s, it was a really great place to live. It was very good, and then it just poverty just struck it, and Harlem became what it was in like the 1970s, 1980s,
Crack epidemic.
1990s. Yeah,
The introduction of crack destroyed the community. But this
yeah.
is the thing. It takes time. So if you look in New York City, you can see that progression. You have that mayor, Eric Adams.
Mm-hmm.
He's a tough on crime Democrat. If you listen to him, sometimes he sounds no different than a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
He sounds just like Giuliani and Bloomberg. It's like, yo, but why? Because New York City is getting tired. So now it's transitioning. The people upstate, when those burglars realize, hey, it's the same law all over the state. Let's go burglarize a home in Rockland and Westchester and Putnam and all these different places. When those folks up there start realizing that people from the city, because it's mostly people from the city's coming up to their place and robbing them, and then if they do get caught, they're walking outside of that local small town police station in 2 hours with no bail. That's when they're gonna start voting.
Mm.
But it takes time for it to get there. Like you said, it's a cancer, but cancer spreads, right? So it has to take time for that cancer to spread to those areas for them to take action. And in the meantime, those politicians are only listening to the loudest voices. The people who are going to galvanize 10,000 people, break windows, break cars, and say, give me what I want, or I'm going to make your city burn. What did Hawk Newsom, who's a BLM advocate for New York, say to this Eric Adams guy? He said, if you do the policies, you bring back these plainclothes officers and you do these policies that I don't want you to do in New York City, there's going to be blood in the streets and we're going to burn this thing down. He literally threatened them. He made a terrorist threat. This is a guy that was in a meeting with that mayor. He's got that kind of political power that mayor sat down on a one-on-one meeting with him. And at the end of the meeting, he literally made a terrorist threat to an elected official.
That's tyranny at its finest.
Do you want to? Let's do an experiment. I'm
All
not going to do it. You do it.
All right.
Write a letter to Eric Adams, since he's the one who got the threat, saying the same thing Hawk Newsom said, and see how fast the FBI come and grab you up and throw you in a cell.
Okay, I'm not gonna do that one letter. Man, I was actually writing that down too. Like, cool. I'm like, oh, what's he want me to do? Oh, he wants me to get arrested by the FBI. Awesome, sweet. All right, guys. It's been nice knowing y'all. No, but I mean, it's definitely upsetting because I definitely remember at the start of the pandemic when everything shut down and Sixth Avenue just got smashed. All those stores, it wasn't like those were like just stores in the hood or in Brooklyn or the Bronx or whatever. Those were stores on Sixth Avenue, Manhattan, and they were nice stores too. Like Macy's was broken into. Fucking Macy's. Like getting shoplifted is one thing, but getting just
Gucci, Fendi, everything
was just gone.
Yeah.
And so yeah, but I mean, how do you feel about Eric Adams? Are you feeling good about him?
I don't know much about him yet to feel any type of way. What I do like is how he's talking. He's saying things that no other politicians have said. He's going after BLM.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a funny relationship with BLM because I don't like them. But there's a lot of reason why other people don't like BLM, and that's not why I don't like BLM. People don't like BLM because some people are racist. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Some people think that they're a terrorist organization. There's all types of reasons. I don't like BLM because I feel like it's just a farce. Because when they raised the money, more money than probably any other organization in a very long time. And what do? Do they build community centers in the community?
They don't.
They sponsor any schools? No. They buy their founders are all of a sudden multimillionaires.
Oh yeah, she bought like a $5 million house. I remember that just a couple months ago.
All of a sudden, they go from just working class people to multimillionaires, and then they all resign. Like, all right, you know. So it's like it's just a money grab. And then the other reason why I don't like BLM is because when people are out there pillaging, destroying communities, oftentimes black communities. Yeah, in New York, they destroyed Fifth and Sixth Avenue and all that stuff. But in Kenosha, in Cali, in Michigan, in Detroit, in Atlanta, they were burning down black communities.
They burned down a couple of stores here in Tampa. Also, it was brutal. Stores that were owned by black owners too.
And BLM says nothing.
Nothing.
When Rashard Brooks was shot by Atlanta PD after he had beat up 2 cops. One cop had a concussion from getting punched in the face. Shame on those cops for getting beat up by one dude. But whatever. He beat up 2 cops. Then he takes their taser and shoots at them. Then he gets shot. That's a lawful shooting, by the way.
Yeah.
And that cop will never be charged. But the point is, when Sakaria Turner, an 8-year-old girl, riding in the backseat of her parents' car, turned into that Wendy's parking lot where Rashard Brooks was killed, and the Bloods had took over that parking lot, and it has come out that Rashard Brooks was a Bloods gang member. When those Bloods gang members who were brothers of Rashard Brooks killed Sakaria Turner, BLM said nothing about it. So we only make noise, we only march, we only burn shit down when it's felons who destroy their communities, get into situations with cops. Sometimes it's justified, sometimes it's not. George Floyd was not justified. But when felons get into situations with cops, we burn it down. Everybody, Black Lives Matter, those guys' lives matter more than everybody else, those felons. But when it's happening to the 8-year-old girl, Sakaria Turner, when it's happening to that 11-year-old girl who was shot in 11-month-old girl who was shot in her face in New York City, when it goes to, Nicholson in Nevada who got killed by his black stepfather, who was also his mother's pimp, when it goes to this 22-year-old cop who was just slaughtered in Harlem, nobody cares. But if you're a felon and you put yourself in the purview of police, I never will agree with George Floyd. I'm going to end it here. My fault. I don't want to go off on a tangent.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
I will never agree with George Floyd. What this guy, Derek Chauvin, did to George Floyd was disgusting, and he deserves every bit of the 35-year sentence that he got. But I'm also a cop, and I live my life according to accountability for myself. We can't let it escape us that George Floyd tried to pass a fake $20 bill, that George Floyd was a drug addict, that George Floyd was a stick-up kid. If he never did that crime,
he'd be alive today. So what would you like Black Lives Matter to do then? If say we waved the magic wand and you were in charge of BLM, what would you have them do?
Number one, there's nothing wrong with protesting when police engage in an injustice against a black person. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
But we also have to acknowledge that the greatest threat to the African-American, the average African-American, is not police officers, it's other black people.
Oh.
I would be addressing crime in the black community. I'd be addressing the drugs in the black community, drug dealing and drug use. I'd be addressing the proliferation of guns in the black community. I'd be addressing the fact that hip-hop culture has become dangerous, a weapon that destroys our children. I'd be taking that money, let's say I was able to raise, because apparently you can only raise those millions if felons are getting killed in the streets. So in our imaginary scenario, if I'm able to raise that money caring about black communities and not just felons, I would use that $100 million to build training centers in the hood, mentoring centers, programs, counseling for family, so that when that young couple's having problems, maybe they can have somebody to talk to try and save that relationship so that they can raise those children as a family rather than having a broken home. Nobody talks about therapy. Me and my friends would have a running joke that by growing up in a hood, we got the same PTSD as these soldiers going out there in these foreign countries watching people die. I've seen people shot up in front of me as a kid. How's that any different than a soldier in Fallujah, in Afghanistan, watching people get shot up? I've seen people commit suicide. Twice a year, somebody jump out the window, to the point where one day I heard, I was like, Mommy, somebody else jumped out the window.
Jesus Christ.
It just becomes normalized.
Yeah.
It's normalized. So nobody talks about therapy. All these activists, all these, these vegans, who know better than everybody else, use tree huggers and all that. Nobody's talking about therapy. Nobody's talking about therapy. I'd use those monies to truly try and help the Black community, where we be nuanced, where we be able to chew gum and talk at the same time, or walk at the same time. We'd be able to tackle injustice that does persist in our government, tackle racism and bigotry that exists in police departments, because it does exist. But we'd also be able to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, what can we do to better our lot? What can we do to stop the violence and the killing? Because you know what? Eric Adams said something amazing today. He said it yesterday, but I actually covered it on my show today.
Oh, yeah? What'd he say?
And I'm going to paraphrase him, but of course he said it more nuanced because it's his words. But I live those words too, so I agree with it. He said, I grew up almost homeless. I grew up with subpar schools, and he had a learning disability. He had dyslexia, so he really was going through it. He said, I grew up with food insecurity. He said, I grew up in the hood with high crime around me, and nothing that I experienced motivated me to pick up a gun and go shoot somebody.
Oof.
Unfortunately, these activists are telling young Black men in the Black community, it's not your fault that you're picking up guns, killing each other. It's not your fault that you're robbing. It's not your fault that you join gangs that tell you to go kill other people and destroy your community. It's not your fault that you're selling drugs to your community. It's the white man's fault, and it's society's fault, because you're the descendants of slave, and this is a inherently racist country. How do you save people if you tell them that nothing that they do is their fault?
You're just giving them a free pass to go do whatever they want, and you're just absolving them of responsibility, and that's just going to lead to nothing but anarchy and nihilism. And I know that because I've seen that with my own eyes.
You can't live in New York City and not see it. Doesn't matter if you're in the Bronx or Staten Island or whatever. So you've been a witness. And the last problem that I have with all this nonsense is that that's not all Black people.
No.
But the media's only showing us the dregs of our society. And the narrative is that every Black man and every Black woman is like that. Every Black man doesn't have a father in his life. Every Black man is a thug. Every Black man is a gangster. And that's just not true. Every Black person I know at this point in my life, not when I was growing up, but at this point in my life, owns a home, a house, a business, or they're a public servant, or they got a really good job. Shoot, my homeboy that I went to school with, he works for Goldman Sachs, and he makes a buku amount of money. These are Black people. But if you turn on the news, all you see is yo, the news is, they pick the most ignorant person. You know what? I've been on crime scenes, guy, and I've watched the news interview, and they'll interview like 6-7 people. And then when I see the news, I only see the most ignorant Black person being showcased. The Black person's like, oh, this is unfortunate. We need to have more this and more that. And they're just well-spoken, representing themselves excellently. That person doesn't make the editing floor. But the person who look like they high on crack with a 2-sentence vocabulary, that's the person that makes it to the national news. So when those activists are talking about that institutional racism, I always say on my show it exists, because to me that's a part of institutional racism. But when they talking about absolving people of their sins simply because of some of the issues we have in this country that we are actively fixing.
Mm-hmm.
This country is not like what it's not like what it was 50 years ago.
Oh no, 50 years ago it was no, it was really bad for your people. It was terrible.
Look at the progress we're making.
I actually ran some numbers with a friend about a week ago. In 2001, there was the amount of black owned businesses was 1.1 million. In 2011, just 10 years, that number was 2.4 million black owned businesses. So it more than doubled. Yeah, and then in 2006 there was one known black billionaire, and as of 2019 there are currently 7 known black billionaires in the United States, and as of right now, most of the black billionaires in the world are in the United States. I think there's like 3 others that are in like Africa, I think, but the rest are here.
The funny thing about that statistic is that we got so many billionaires, and like the billionaires that we have is like astronomical. Like when I was growing up, Bill Gates was the richest man on earth for like 50 billion. Now we're measuring the richest person by like 150 billion.
More 200
or more, 200.
Yeah,
but we're talking about black billionaires. How many black millionaires? That's the question.
Are you ready? Are you ready for this statistic? So actually, black and Asian millionaires are the 2 highest minority groups. So obviously, white millionaires are number 1, and then it's black and Asians are tied at 8% each of total millionaires in the United States.
Mind you, there's only 40 million black people in America. So, our country is not perfect.
Oh, no country is perfect, and you'll never have a perfect country because you're always going to have problems because that's life.
So for them to try and make us think like, but even though we're not perfect, you look at all the progress that we made. You look at how far we've come and how far we have to go, and the trajectory that we're on to get there. The trajectory we're on is not a backwards trajectory.
No.
There's nothing in the laws, there's nothing in our society that's saying that we're going to go backwards and have more bigotry. Every year it's going to be less and less and less and less and less until we don't have any at all. Well, you'll always have bigotry, but you know what I mean. No consequence. Bigotry that can't actually stop you from achieving the things you want to achieve. So that's why I fight against that on my show, because it's just not true. So when they say that police officers are slave catchers, well, maybe they were 200, 300 years ago. They damn sure ain't slave catchers now. They're the ones that you open your door to in Harlem because you're having a dispute with your son. He didn't threaten you. That murderer did not threaten his mother. That murderer did not put his hands on his mother. He had an argument with his mother over veganism because he's a vegan, and his mother recently had a surgery where she had a stent put into her heart, into her artery. So he's trying to convince his mother she needs to change her eating habits so she could be around for another decade. And because of that disagreement, his mother called the NYPD. Black woman. That's what happened. A black woman called NYPD and opened the door and let them in her house. And then her son slaughtered one of them and possibly 2. The other one is clinging to his life. That's where we are in 2022. If he was a slave catcher, she wouldn't have let him in the door. All right? That's the guy she called to solve her problems. So why are these activists talking about slave catchers? It's ridiculous to me. It really is.
I just found it more. I'm still digesting that story, and because usually when you think of like people who are vegans, you think of like these people who are like very zen, peaceful people. You don't think of people who are just attacking police officers and. Well, maybe you think about people who force their ideas on other people, but like physically attacking people though, that's just not usually synonymous with vegans. And we're hitting a crazy era, and I don't know what to make of it, man.
This guy had a history of violence. I mean, maybe he had some mental health issues. I don't know. The mother was interviewed by the Post very briefly, and she said, the only thing I can tell you is that my son was she used a specific word which I forgot, but she basically said her son was in a bad mental state or something to that effect. But the word she used explains it better. It's much more it was a better way of putting it. But the bottom line is I don't know. But I do know is he had an extensive criminal record.
Mm-hmm.
But what I also know is that even though he had a criminal record and he was on probation, there was no warrants out for him. There was no reason that those officers would take him into custody. It would just be a mediation. And since he had ample amount of police contact in the past, he would know that. All right. I remember one time I was I was just doing like a community visit and I was just hanging out in the community, which is what I do because I'm a part of that whole community policing thing.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. It's all good. So I'm hanging out just talking to folks in front of the projects and one person was like, yo, I didn't see this guy named Black. This is AKA. Did you guys arrest Black? Because we saw Black get taken in custody or whatever. Turns out he didn't. He walked by like an hour later. And we joked about it. I was like, they were saying I was arresting. He was like, oh, what? Everybody been saying that. I'm good. What's wrong with these folks? But one of the guys was like, no, he didn't arrest Black because if he arrested Black, he wouldn't be out here right now because once they arrest somebody, they're inside for the rest of the day.
Mm-hmm.
My point in telling you this story is that folks who deal with cops know our policies. They know how we work.
Mm-hmm.
He's been dealing with cops for years. He's been in and out of jail. He's been arrested multiple times for violent crimes. He knows how it works. He knows I'm on probation and I've checked in with my probation officer. I'm not going to jail for having a dispute with my mother. And furthermore, it has come out that the police have been called to that residence multiple times for these small type of disputes. So he's spoken to the cops before in these small type of disputes and never never felt that he was going to get arrested, that he'd need to like shoot his way out of it. He would know that this would be another routine call that he's had to deal with his mother. What I think motivated to him to do it, other than some type of mental illness, is the fact that on his social media he was posting anti-cop stuff. On his social media, he's posting violence against police officers, shooting police officers.
He got radicalized.
Radicalized. He's watching, young Pharaoh on YouTube talking about lizard people and body snatchers and shapeshifters and all this extra stuff. Like that's on his social media. That's him broadcasting that, posting it, embedding it onto his Facebook for the world to see. This is what I'm about. This is my beliefs. I want you to watch it so maybe you could start thinking the way I think too. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I said in my video where I spoke about the Baltimore police officer. I'm always terrible with names, so whenever I'll describe this situation, but I should know names or whatever. I think her name was Kiana Harris or something like that. Kiana something, but definitely Kiana. But this Baltimore female police officer was just ambushed and shot in her head, and I covered that on my channel. And I said this is as a result of this extremist conversation that these activists are putting into the public sphere. This is what happened to Wenjen Liu and Rafael Ramos, two NYPD cops who were assassinated by a guy who was upset that Eric Garner died in Staten Island. And he posted on his social media, he's going to go kill cops to avenge Eric Garner. And that's what he did. When you start talking this extremist rhetoric, 99% of the people who hear it are going to say, right on, you screw this, screw cops. But they'll never go kill a cop. In fact, they might leave their house and say hi to a cop. Like, hey, how you doing? Or call a cop for service. But there's that 1% who are already mentally ill who you're going to trigger to go do something stupid. So to me, what happened in that apartment was as a result of that extremist conversation that's pervasive in our culture right now.
So what do we do about that?
Well, you don't silence people because then that's against the Constitution.
Agreed. I don't want there to be silence. I think silencing would be the worst thing you could do to these people.
Absolutely. Because then they'll go in the underground and then you'll get terrorism. What you got to do is you got to push back. What you got to do is instead of having, these news channels that we actually pay for that are supposed to be, down the middle or at least factual, you got to get all these opinionated shows off the air, or at least not off the air. That definitely not off the air. But you have to make sure that the people know that this is opinion. Like when Rachel Maddow and Joy Reid and what's this guy from Fox News? I really don't watch any Fox News whatsoever. So Tucker Carlson.
Mm-hmm.
When these guys talk, they're both on the extremes. One is on the right, Tucker Carlson, the other two are on the left. They speak authoritatively as though they're telling you facts. When Joy Reid calls somebody racist, she's saying it authoritatively as though she's looked in that person's soul and she knows that they're a racist. She has some inside knowledge. We need to tell people and educate the population that those folks are speaking opinion. And then we need to have real news sources that give you real news that's factual and unbiased. Because we don't have that right now. CNN is biased. Fox News is biased. MSNBC is biased. Even local news stations are becoming biased.
Mm-hmm.
You got to push back. And I'm seeing a lot of that happening in New York right now. A lot of those politicians are pushing back. I watched a politician stand up and say, why isn't the entire New York City out here to support this slain officer, Jason Rivera? Why? She was like, if a black guy got shot by cops, you'd all be out here. A politician said that.
Wow.
On national television in New York City, the most liberal city in the country. And there's no pushback. You know why? Because the people are tired. And guess who's silent? Black Lives Matter is silent.
When politicians are sounding more moral than the news, we have a serious problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So like say I'm a 22-year-old kid and I'm just watching this right now and I'm feeling inspired to push back. What should I do?
Well, I mean, I think a good thing is to support independent media like my channel and your channel.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important.
Don't forget to subscribe to Strategic Eyes.
Absolutely. Please subscribe to the Strategic Eyes show. That's important. Another thing you can do is get back to your community. You know, volunteer. Go be a part of that change. You know, go if you're a 22-year-old and you got your life together and you know you're a good role model. Go volunteer to be a role model of some kid that doesn't have a father figure or, you know, just a big brother. I mean, you're a little too young to be a father figure, but just a big brother. Go do that. You know, go serve. I mean, if you are smart enough to be a doctor or a lawyer or a banker, then do that. Because at the end of the day, you got to feed your family and you got to create that generational wealth to support your kids for the generations. Do that because you're not gonna get that being a cop or a firefighter. But if you don't got nothing going on and you got good moral character, and why don't you serve your community? Become a cop. Be that change. You know, I started policing late because I had a second career. This is my second career. I had a primary career. This is my second career. Now that because I'm in policing so old, in my late 30s, there's no way in hell somebody's gonna come up to me and say, "Yo, go stop and frisk that guy." And I don't have probable cause. Like, yeah, go fuck yourself, man. I'll take that vacation day. I don't care. Now, would a 22-year-old kid do that? No.
No, he's scared. He doesn't know what to do.
He's scared. He doesn't know what to do. But with a guy who's been in law enforcement for over 15 years, who knows the union rights and all that extra stuff and is not afraid and, you know, and in 5 years I'm out of here, screw you. You know, could I do that? Yeah. And would I do that? Yeah. But because of my experiences, somebody would be protected. Could I protect everybody? But no, I could protect that one guy by saying, no, I don't have probable cause to do it. I go so far as to turn on my camera and say, you want me, supervisor, say that on camera. You want me to go, please articulate the probable cause that you want me to go. And you know what I'm saying? Because now that guy's in trouble. And once again, since I don't have 25, 30 years to go to retire, it doesn't matter if I'm on that guy's shit list for the next couple of years because I could just, peace, I'm gone. And get all my benefits. You know what I'm saying? So if you have good character, consider serving. But most importantly, the most bare minimum thing you can do is be open-minded. When you see these police-involved situations that happens on the news, it is quite possible that cop could be a murderer or a criminal. It's also quite possible that what you're hearing is a lie and that cop is justified in what they're doing. Be patient. Wait for the facts. Don't run out into these streets because your friend said it's cool to do and go bash stuff up. Be patient. Wait for it to come out. Because guess what? The people of Kenosha wish they had all the facts before they ran out and burned their city down for Jacob Blake. How do I know this? It's because when that district attorney got on the podium and explained why he was not going to charge the cops for shooting Jacob Blake 7 times in the back, and explained why Jacob Blake was wrong, people thought Kenosha was going to burn down for a second time. And it was only 20 people, largely made up of Jacob Blake's family, that was protesting outside of the courthouse. Why? Because when the people got the facts, when they found out that Jacob Blake was a rapist, when they found out that he was there terrorizing and was trying to kidnap his kids, when they found out that he really did have a knife in his hand, when that district attorney read out the statement and said that black witnesses in that community saw him with the knife in his hand, and they said, I thought he was going to turn around and stab the officer.
Oof.
When they found out those facts, they did what all people would do who are sensible. They said, oh my gosh, this guy is guilty. I'm not going to go out my house and protest. But that's not what they had when it first came out. What they had was a media and activists who told the narrative of an innocent black man who was just driving by, minding his business. This is a true story of what they said here. And he saw with his kids hanging out, and he saw 2 stranger women fighting, and he decided to stop his car, being a good Samaritan, to stop that fight. And then the big bad cops came out of nowhere and shot him in the back, and that's not what happened. That was a domestic violence case. And he was kidnapping his children and stealing the car.
Did you ever see the footage of from the other side of the car, where he was actually wrestling with another officer on the ground?
Even that footage is incomplete. What happened is that he pretty much beat all those cops up.
Why are these cops getting their ass kicked left and right?
Because you don't get a lot of, unless you're like in a big department, even in big departments, you don't get a lot of tactical training.
That seems so counterintuitive.
Yeah, but people don't want to spend on that stuff. Look, I mean, when we have body armor, people say that we're militarized and they're scared. So now if you start seeing,
if
jujitsu and all this stuff, oh my God, they're MMA guys, they're dangerous.
I think cops need to be it should be at the very least a blue belt in jujitsu, because
you got to go out and do that on your own. You have to literally go out there, spend your own money, do it on your own. Because, all right, so how would you do it? You'd have to pay the cops overtime, to get that training an hour after work every other day. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just not, a lot of it's not feasible, but
it's expensive.
For the most part, it's expensive. And for the most part, you don't recruit warriors. Because most of the job in the policing is not being a warrior. Most of it is being level-headed, being personable, talking people down, de-escalation, mediating. There's a ton of military people who would love to be cops, and so you can have a police force in the country that's mostly comprised of Navy SEALs if you really wanted to. But then a lot of those folks are going to be using hammers on every nail that they see, as they say in the saying. What you want is, one of the women that was overpowered was some dumpy fat girl in Kenosha. Well, guess what? She's probably the best negotiator in that department. She's the one that comes up to the perp and rubs his head and says, relax, honey, don't do that. Come on. And he calms down because it's a female talking to him. And guess what? Everybody's good because the cops don't get hurt fighting him and he don't get hurt. So you need to have diverse police forces. And when you have diverse police forces, then you're going to get cops getting beat up. And especially when you have small towns where they're not doing a lot of fighting, then they're not on high alert all the time to go and get those courses, on their own. And so they get beat. Quick story. I used to be just out of shape. Like, I'm still working on my body. I got a long way to go, but I'm strong. You know what I'm saying? What motivated me to get into the gym was I body slammed the dude who was about to get shot. I looked at the sergeant. Sergeant said, "You go for it." So I saved him. His back was turned. I came, tackled him. Boom. All kinds of accolades because everybody knew, because he had a knife. Everybody knew he was about to get shot. But I took that risk and tackled the dude, even though he had a weapon. And so we were able to take that guy into custody without anything. He didn't even get criminally charged because he was mentally ill. So we just basically sent him to the mental hospital. So his life got saved, and he doesn't even have a record for what he did because he was legitimately crazy. For the next 2 weeks, my entire upper body was destroyed with one tackle. And then I woke up, I said, yo, you can't be on these streets, dumpy dude, where body slamming one guy got you off the count for a whole week. And that's what made me get in that gym. Now, I'm using force all the time, unfortunately. It's nothing to be proud of, but it's what the streets is asking for, what these perps are doing. And it's no big deal. Why? Because I'm in shape. But if you're in a situation like these guys working in these small towns and you don't got to deal with that stuff, what's the motivation? You just eating and sitting around all day and taking reports.
So definitely maybe not in like the smaller cities like in like Kingston, New York, but definitely in the larger ones like Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse.
This is a piece of shit, so they need to definitely.
Yeah. it's a small piece of shit.
Yeah, I mean, pick a different city because they get busy up in Kingston.
Yeah, but definitely like, and I definitely hear you, like the cost to train these people, because you're not the first cop to tell me that hand-to-hand combat training is garbage in New York City. My best friend growing up was actually at NYPD, and he's a fourth-degree black belt in Taekwondo with like multiple knockouts in the ring. Like he's a bad motherfucking dude, and he just told me just horror stories about how the hand-to-hand fighting, they would train at the academy 1 hour a week on hand-to-hand combat, but then 2 hours a day at the range with their guns. And he's like, if he misses if an officer who's not trained with their hands, with their fist, misses with a gun, that officer is screwed. And so, and I definitely hear you, because it's going to be expensive.
You look at it from a different perspective with the example you just gave. Mm-hmm. He's saying that, if you miss, forget about that, bro. That's the wrong way of looking at it.
Oh,
the way of looking at it is, if people aren't comfortable getting hands-on, but you train them to the teeth on how to use deadly physical force, what are they going to go to when they feel that their life is in danger? They'll go to the gun. So that's the real problem. The real problem is not if you miss, what are you going to do? The real problem is, what solution did you go to first?
The handgun.
Exactly. And maybe if you were comfortable with your hands, you would be able to save that person's life by using your hands, which is less lethal.
So that, I think that feeds more into the point that I was on my way to making. Sorry, I get really long-winded. But it's that it's definitely expensive to train police officers, but what are the long-term benefits going to be, and do you think it would be worth it, if we were to just up the level of training of hand-to-hand combat and negotiations and just conflict resolution, instead of always training? Because the way he made it sound, I don't know if it's true or not, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but he just tells me that there's a lot more training on using firearms, at least when he was going through training. And this was NYPD, by the way.
Well, I mean, I don't know the NYPD training, but I do know that it pretty much follows with most of the state, because there's a curriculum that you have to follow in order to, be certified as police officers. So, yeah, I think he's pretty much correct. But I think, to answer your question, is we have to start looking at policing as though it's on the same level as lawyers and doctors and other professionals.
I would love that.
And if we start paying cops more, we raise, like in New York, a lot of agencies require you to have a college degree. So New York is one of those states where you do have a more educated police force.
Yeah, he needed 40 college credits from John Jay to enter the academy.
And it's so at least you have that, but I dare say you should have a bachelor's degree. if you raise the limit to a bachelor's degree, if you pay police officers a boatload of money, you're going to pull a lot of people from other sectors who bring in different qualifications into policing. You're going to get a whole bunch of therapists that are like, you know what? I make $90,000 and being a police officer will get me $120. I'm not going to lose anything transferring over. Let me go be a cop. So now you got a cop on the street that's literally a certified therapist. Now you got a cop on the street that's a lawyer. Now you got a cop on the street that's older, more mature. I think the problem that we have with policing is that we want so much from our cops, but we're not willing to invest in our cops. So yeah, we could invest more in training, and we should, but let's work on the stock that we have that's actually getting that training. Let's work on the people who are actually the foundation of that department by only getting the best of the best. And people don't want to understand that the only way you're going to get the best of the best is if you're willing to pay for it. Like, if it wasn't for the retirement of being a police officer, they would not have me because the pay sucks.
I've heard that.
So at least they had one beneficial thing that was able to pull me away from my lucrative career working as a state investigator. Now think about how many more of my colleagues, because other colleagues were thinking about it too, like, yeah, man, their retirement is really good. Like, you know, should we make the move too? But they're like, I can't swing it. I got mortgages. I got all this extra stuff. Their wives, a lot of them, like, I'm in a household that has two incomes. A lot of them, they would live in like the 1960s, one income household. Now, how many more of my colleagues who are investigating narcotics in the prison system, sex crimes with me in the prison system, intelligence, because there's a lot of intelligence that comes out the prison system. How many of those dudes would have take those skills, and they're also older and mature, and we're also former correction officers? How many of those guys would have come over to PD with me and bring that wealth of knowledge if the pay was higher?
I would say a whole lot, actually.
Exactly. So I think before we even talk about spending more in training, we need to respect the position of police officer and pay them more. And then I think you'll see a big difference in the way that people are being policed.
That's absolutely amazing. Wow. This has been really, really eye-opening. Thank you so much for this.
No problem.
Wow. All right. So I just got one more question to ask before we go for the close. Strategic, which is what kind of impact are you looking to have on the world?
I mean, I never have any grand dreams like that. I know being on YouTube, you can make 1 million videos and not go too far. You can make one video and literally change the world. I think the biggest impact, I have a very diverse audience. A lot of white folks subscribe to my channel, but really my message is for all Americans, but mostly primarily for African Americans. And the impact that I would like is for Black people to realize that we are a strong, beautiful people, and we're not victims, and we have the power to change a lot in this country. And, you know, talking down to and hating our brothers who are white or even Asian is not going to get us anywhere. You know, we need to come together as Americans and solve these issues as Americans. And we should never forget the past, but we should learn from the past. And we should not let the past dictate our future or control us. So if there's an impact that I want, my impact is to help my people be the best version of themselves that they can possibly be. And in turn, bring us all together as just Americans.
Beautifully well said. Well said. I love it. All right, where can people find out more information about you?
You come to Strategic Eyes Show. You just go to YouTube, type in Strategic Eyes Show. You know, you can edit in the name down there at some point. That'd be great. I don't know what your skills are on editing.
There's going to be a link down in the description.
Awesome. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Just come to the channel, like and subscribe, join the channel, and help us grow because I am being shadow banned by YouTube.
Ah.
My message is just not lucrative for them.
All right, brother. Well, thank you very much for this. Is there anything else you want to add before?
No, man.
All right. Cool.
No, I appreciate you. Thank you for giving me this platform and allowing me to come to your show and speaking to some of your guests. And you're always welcome to come on a Strategic Eyes show. I appreciate you, man.
I appreciate you too. All right, folks. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Hope you guys learned something. I learned a whole lot from that. I've got about 1, 2, 3 pages worth of notes, and you heard it, man. We're gonna build this place up. We're gonna build this country up, and we're all gonna come together as Americans because we're still a beautiful people. All right, folks. Have a great day. Peace.